Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Shannons Club TV, where we look back on cars with significant road and race histories in Australia.
We've received a terrific response to these paired stories on the Shannons Club website, where you can connect with other members and catch up on previous episodes.
Coming up, we'll meet a proud owner of our feature car and get some expert advice from the Shannons auctions team. Right now though, let's take a look at the mid-sized Ford that failed to live up to expectations. The TC and TD Cortina.
The original 1962 Ford Cortina is one of the key cars of the 20th century. It was arguably the first ever mainstream British sedan designed from the start to appeal to an international audience. But sadly, later models proved less impressive. Consider the TC, which hit Australian roads just months after the HQ Holden in the spring of 1971. It seemed to represent an automotive dream come true. Some road test figures had the new four-cylinder Cortina recording performance equal to an Alfetta, but most of the cars that made their troubled way down the production line at Ford Australia's Broadmeadows plant proved much slower, though still quicker than a Kingswood 202, like 20 miles an hour quicker. TC stood for Taunus Cortina, and for the first time the British and the Germans shared the one basic design. The car looked bigger than its predecessors, but interestingly length remained just 14 feet neat, although the wheelbase was 3 inches longer and the car was an amazing 4 inches wider. But Mark, despite all its newfound performance, the TC Cortina was never going to rival the original Cortina GT, was it?
No, I mean, the original Cortina dominated the early years at Bathurst, and then of course by the 1970s Ford had the Falcon GTHO, so there was no sort of real spot for it in the performance. It did race at Bathurst one year in one of the showroom-based classes, but of course with everything based on showroom price, what it was up against was far too competitive, which I'll get to a bit later.
Probably in response to the success of the Tirana six-packs, Ford Australia's engineers dropped the heavy old Falcon 6 into the Cortina, producing the proverbial lead-tipped arrow. Much body strengthening was required to persuade the car to carry such a lump. This had advantages for the four-cylinder models too, which became significantly more robust than their UK equivalents. But robust doesn't mean the panel fit on Aussie cars was up to the mark. All Cortina 6s got quad headlights, which was a typically smart piece of Ford marketing. There was no problem with the image, only the reality. The TD facelift arrived in 1974 with an all-new dashboard plus XB Falcon steering column, wheel and control stalks. Interestingly, the front anti-roll bar was deleted, but one was fitted at the rear. The reason for this was to reduce understeer, with reduce being the operative verb. Mark, did the TC and TD Cortinas achieve anything of note in Australian motorsport?
Well, they proved very popular in sports sedan racing in the 1970s by putting V8 engines in them. And it's interesting that that concept was something Ford Australia considered as a replacement for the Falcon GTHO. Although the TC, or Mark III Cortina, was destined not to continue the winning ways of its smaller and lighter Mark I and Mark II predecessors, in 1971 Ford Australia gave serious consideration to the idea of shoehorning a 5.8 litre V8 into a TC as a potential rival for Holden's looming V8 Tirana. Although the concept of a hot V8 powered Cortina replacing the Falcon GTHO never progressed beyond initial discussions, the concept did prove popular in 1970s sports sedan racing. Numerous highly modified examples appeared on local tracks, most notably in the hands of Graham Moore, Bob Stevens, Pat Cray and John Mann. With powerful V8 engines, bulging wheel arch flares, wide tyres and barking exhausts, these wild-looking TC and TD Cortinas added plenty of colour and excitement to the booming sports sedan class and left us wondering what might have been had Ford pursued its Tirana-crushing V8 plans. John, it's interesting that Ford even considered, building a V8 TC Cortina as a production car, given that the six-cylinder version was, widely criticised as a lead-tipped arrow, too much weight over the front end.
I think it's a bit like you could give the Coyote rocket power, but it was still never going to catch the wily Roadrunner,
Yeah, it was always its problem, wasn't it? I mean, you had the six-cylinder Tirana, which seemed to be a reasonable handling car, but the transition for the TC from a four-cylinder to a six, it never worked.
No, that's right. And I think the engineering for the Tirana was all done locally, and I think, the car was, in a sense, beefed up for it properly. But I think Ford Australia's decision to put the six-cylinder engine into the Cortina, well, go it alone, son, I think.
And a braver man than me to put a V8 in it.
Absolutely.
Although the Cortina's days as an outright Bathurst winner were clearly behind it by 1971, a privately entered TC Cortina 2000L did compete in that year's 500-mile race in the hands of Jim Sullivan and Jeff Westbury. Backed by the New South Wales Closters Ford dealership, the four-cylinder 2-litre Pinto-powered Cortina was entered in Class C, based on its showroom price. However, in performance terms, it was outclassed by more potent rivals, including Mazda's rotary RX-2, Holden's six-cylinder Tirana GTR, and Ford's twin-cam Escort. Even so, the Cortina's bonnet was never raised during the race, on its way to a trouble-free 8th in class and 35th overall in Australia's toughest race for production cars. Although this result received little recognition at the time, it was in fact the closing chapter of the Cortina's proud history on the mountain, which started with 3 consecutive outright wins for the mighty Mark I in the 1960s. Don't forget, you can join the conversation on the Shannons Club forums with a host of interesting topics.
Hi, my name's Bill. This is my 1975 TD XLE Cortina. I bought the car probably 6 years ago. The car's completely original. All I've done is repainted it. It's got the original roof lining, original trim, original engine. Everything on the car's original. Original carpet. Nothing's been changed in the interior. The original owner owned it since brand new. He bought a brand new 1975 from Sleeman Ford. When he passed away, he passed it down to his son. My first car I bought back in 1983 was a TC Cortina, which is a model previous to this. So I've just had the passion for these cars since I was 18. I've got 3 others apart from this one. I've got a TC which I drag race, a wagon, same as this that I'm restoring at the moment, and I've got another sedan that I've got sitting at home. I just like the shape of the car. The one I had was a 6-cylinder, so it had a bit of power for the size of the car. The favourite memory was when I took it back to show the original owner, and I just seen how excited he was to see the car. Well, I'm just going to keep it all original. Yeah, I wouldn't sell it, but it'll probably get passed down to my son in time to come.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borrobin joins us for an update on the TC-TD Cortina. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, John. Welcome, Mark. It's interesting when you look at this car. I mean, it seems like a natural competitor by Ford to take on Holden's Tirana 6. But in collectible terms, it hasn't worked out that way over the years, has it?
No, it hasn't. I mean, I don't think, they never really brought out that special model. The high-powered model. I mean, even though the 4.1 variant in the TC or TDs were actually very capable cars.
Well, I mean, it was available in a 1.6 litre 4, a 2 litre 4, and then they put the 2 big 6s in it. But I think, from what I've read, and certainly from road tests I've read, the 4-cylinder car was actually pretty well balanced.
My own view is they would have done better if they just brought out the 2-litre engine and not bothered with the rest, because it was the right weight of engine for the car. It had a good power to weight ratio, and it was quite a sporty engine, that Pinto 4-cylinder.
It was a good motor.
Quite a zappy engine, a single overhead camshaft unit. Whereas the boat anchor Falcon 6, which they put in the car, gave it a lot of straight line urge, but wasn't too much
Didn't
in
want
terms
to know
of
about
helping
corner.
the handling.
Wouldn't want to go around corners very fast, would you?
No.
So in collectability terms, when you're looking at this model car, is the 4-cylinder more desirable or the 6-cylinder model?
Good question, and I think, you know, they're so far and few today in the marketplace.
You never
that
see them, do you?
You don't,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to pinpoint. I mean, probably when you do see them come on the market, they're cars that have been modified or actually set up for drag racing.
Yeah.
They were very popular with drag races.
That's
in
right,
the day.
in the street drag scene
Yep.
of the late 80s, early 90s. I remember they were putting V8s in Capris,
That's right,
and they were
yep.
putting V8s in these things, and they were everywhere at the drag strip.
That's right.
In terms of quirky 70s collectability, I think the XLE with those, you know, the colour coordinated hubcaps
Beautiful.
would be a bit of a hoot.
Vinyl
wouldn't it?
roof, yeah.
Turquoise or yellow or one
Yeah.
of those 70s colours.
If you can find them, and
is,
it's getting increasingly hard too. I mean, you know, we used to see the little one-lady owner car come up, and no longer is the case.
I guess this means, though, as a sort of entry-level classic car, it's got a TC or TD Cortina, it's got a bit of potential for collectors.
And it probably does. I mean, if you can find the right car, you know, that's been well preserved, it's probably a great entry level point because they're not fetching that much still, and it's probably, you know, affordable point.
It's one of the great things about this passion we have is that you can come into it at all different levels of wealth.
Of course, that's right.
And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today,
No, thank you.
Chris. And remember, you can get all the latest auction news on the Shannons Club website.
If you want your own image of the TC Cortina in competition, check out AutoPic's huge archive. John, looking back at the Cortina TC-TD, I mean, at the head of the show we said it didn't live up to expectations. I guess that's the way you have to sort of encapsulate that car.
I think the point about it is that the expectations were high because it was quite a reasonable looking car, certainly quite modern and you know, really up to date.
And certainly on the back of the Mark 1 and Mark 2. I mean,
and a very good little engine and a nice 4-speed gearbox. People had reasonably high hopes for it, but it didn't deliver.
It doesn't make sense though, does it, when you think it's the same company that was making the Falcon, but this thing had you know, all sorts of build quality issues, things fell off, it had reliability troubles, handling.
Yeah.
It's amazing that a car going down the similar production lines had those problems.
Well, I think as we were discussing earlier, it certainly wasn't as bad as that in Europe.
Yeah,
So it was a bit of a Ford Australia failure, really.
a
in
Ford
some
Australia
respects.
problem.
Yeah, I think so.
Certainly caused them plenty of heartache.
It did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the Ford TC-TD Cortina. We look forward to your company next time on Shannons Club TV. Bye for now.